Welcome to This Old App, a podcast about learning, coding, smashing stuff together, breaking things apart, startups, failing, winning, and any other buzzwords we can think of.
All right, this week we have Mark Thompson back again. Mark, how's it going?
It's going wonderful.
So we talked previously about your app, Totally Strong, and people can, by the way, go check that out at totallystrong.me. But we talked about the technology that you used, which was Dart and Flutter. It was a new technology that you kind of learned on the fly. But you also did something else for this build that was not a typical solo founder type of thing. You set a 30-day deadline starting in December 1, and your goal was to build and launch by that deadline. And you kind of were speaking out loud to Twitter the whole time. And so I was tracking you and paying attention. I want to go through the psychology because you were a student at this point. You also had a newborn in the family at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious about why you set this. First off, why did you set this date? What was your motivation for that? And then we'll kind of break into more of what you went through to meet some of these goals.
Yeah, wonderful. So for me, the motivation behind the 30 days is because as most developers, we see something, we think we can do it, or we have all these ideas of apps that we think we can create. And one of the hardest things for developers to do, and just most people, is follow through. And I always, from the front of the classroom when I'm teaching, I'm always talking about, well, you got to be faithful to the follow through. That's one of my favorite phrases. You got to be faithful to the follow through. And so if you do that, you will find the success that you want. And I told myself that so many times, because I have been thinking of this app for about 10 years, to be honest with you, or more, since I was in college. I had thought about it in PHP, some way to make a workout app, because it was the same problem. And I almost did it, but I never finished. And so I told myself, I'm so tired of making these grand plans where I talk to my wife about this great version of a fitness app, and then I'm going to make it, and then I don't make it.
Mm-hmm.
And so
we've all been there, by the way. There's very few developers that have no app ideas, that just go to work and don't think of building something for themselves, but they never do it. I'm definitely guilty. I have a crap ton of half done or even quarter done GitHub repos sitting with ideas. So I totally hear you on that part.
Yeah, and I just want to do better by myself and say, you know what, I can prove myself right, that I can complete something, and I'm going to make the students proud, because I knew that if I announced that I was going to work on something like that, they would hold me accountable. And I just want to really, show my wife, for instance, because she's a real big supporter of me and my dreams, that I could actually follow through and make something happen.
Yep. So accountability was part of your reasoning. Why did you set 30 days? What was the thinking around that?
So I wouldn't over-engineer it. That was my number one reason. So I wouldn't over-engineer, because you know how that goes, where you start to think of a problem and you can come up with a good solution, or you can use your engineer hat and come up with the super solution, right? And I thought that, what would be successful to get it out there, because so I listen to another podcast a lot, or another community of people who are this. It's called the Indie Hacker Community, where people would make things, right? Yep. And I was like, a lot of these people talk about all the time that they shipped, even though it wasn't perfect, and it was almost laughable with what they shipped with.
Yeah. And so you were on Twitter as well, and you're pretty much speaking, I didn't know about your project starting until I saw you probably 5 days in tweeting about it. So what was your motivation for tweeting to the open sky about what you were doing?
No, that's pretty funny, because one, I don't have a ton of Twitter followers, so it really was It's like 50 people, and I'm just tweeting every single night. Like, people are gonna get tired of me. Yeah, the motivation behind that was one, to create that like social accountability, so the people around me knew what was happening. But I thought it'd be really cool if I can create a social accountability where my friends and colleagues or other people maybe that I don't know could see this person working and like ask me about it and ask if I actually finished, and
Yeah.
also to motivate people to say, you know what, he did it. Like, he did it, so I can do it. What's my dream? What can I create?
So did you? I know when I would listen, like honestly, you didn't tweet too much. When you went silent, I was like, "What's wrong?" I would always be like, "What's going on? Why did he drop off?" And then I would, if I didn't have time, sometimes I responded, and we would have these direct message chats, which was weird because I don't talk to anyone on Twitter, but like you're the only person I direct message. But even if you didn't mentions, or even if you said something and I didn't have time to at least reply, I would still like it, just so
Hmm.
you knew I read this. And I not that that would mean a ton, but it's just like, hey, you're not just talking to the open sky. There are people listening. So did you have other communities that you were, because Indie Hackers, I think Cortland Allen is the guy that founded that community, which is really strong. Did you participate in any other developer communities while you were doing this that you found beneficial?
I did not, and I was actually too afraid to join indie hackers because I felt like I didn't have enough to show, even though that's the opposite behavior that you're supposed to have with that
Yes.
community. Total
Yes,
opposite.
totally. I bet there's a lot of people though that are waiting, but you've joined since then.
I started getting closer to joining. I'm looking at the forum, and literally I look at the forum like once a week. Like, okay, am I ready to post that I'm working on something, or is it just not good enough to even show that I started on?
Yeah. So, but that again, your apprehensions, there's a lot of people that are like that. So, you're at the first, let's talk about the first 10 days. You got started. How efficient were you? How was your energy level? How are things going along? Talk about the first 10 days.
Yeah, so the first 10 days were really interesting because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about the diagram that most people talk about when you have a new technology, where things start off really high and then you hit this valley of like where things get really tough, and that's whenever you introduce new tech. And I
Yeah.
was thinking about like, can I avoid this? Is this something that I can avoid completely? And it's in the back of my mind, so I'm really motivated. And after I watched a couple of those videos, for like I said, from the Google Code Lab, and then watching that
Yeah.
YouTube stream a couple of times. As I watched that, I'm like, okay, you know what? Let me just start. And I started cranking out screens on the app, and that's how I measured my progress. I would just measure it in which screens I got done.
Hmm.
And I spent just night after night just writing a bunch of code, and I felt so good because I put off a lot of the tough problems for later, things like login and data persistence. Right. And you
Hmm.
actually replied to one of my tweets about data persistence. You said it was a version 2 like feature. And,
Yeah.
and that's the way I treated it, because I said, you know what, login and data persistence, all that won't matter if there's nothing to log into. Right. That was my mindset. If there's nothing to
Yeah.
show once you log in, I'd rather have an app that doesn't support login that you can do a workout before that, before I
Yeah.
spent, 4 weeks or whatever on the login and data.
Well, that is interesting because I do remember us talking about it. One of the psychology issues or psychological issues that I've had as a developer is I get fixated on things that I want to get done. And so Don, my co-host on many of our other show and this one, he'll often tell me like, "Whoa, I think you're thinking too much about this," or "This is not something you need to focus on." And I do the same to him. I will constantly tell him about features that, are you sure that's what is going to solve what the problem? Because you're describing a solution and you're describing a problem that don't seem to be in sync. And having that other person to bounce things off of is helpful, even if they aren't working on the code with you. So, was I the only person talking to you, or did you have other people, at least that in your network, that were kind of aware?
Yeah, so there I have two people that I talk to the most candidly about my experience. right? And
Mhm.
I think I talked to you very candidly about some of the challenges that I was facing. And
Yeah.
I have a good friend who started his own company, but it's not a tech company. He's a copywriter, but he and I think alike. You know, we have very similar
Yeah.
background in wanting to be successful. And I would talk to him candidly, like, you know what, I'm having a really hard time right now, or like the time that you and I talked, where I was really defeated, to be honest with you,
Yep. Yep.
and I was ready to just stop because I had set up this kind of momentum. And like I said, I had people in the Flutter community saying, okay, you know, because when I got to around 5 or 7 days left, I started counting down, and people were watching. And then when I didn't deploy on time, right, like that
Hmm.
moment was like devastating to me.
Yep. But the thing is, you found someone. You had someone to talk to, and the great thing was that that person didn't have to talk to you about code. It didn't need to be a developer. It needed to be someone that you knew that understands what it's like to start up something. But even then, you had someone to confide in about frustration. And I'm talking about the copywriter guy, not me as much. But that's important, I think, for folks to recognize is that you may be a solo founder or a solo developer, but you don't have to work alone. And especially with the psychological part, which can weigh you down. So that helped you a lot in that case. Um,
Absolutely. And speaking of psychological stuff, I find that even though I'm not in the, like I said, the venture capital world where I'm raising a bunch of money and I'm working in the office until 3 a.m., you know,
yeah.
with two other people, I felt so lonely at times when I was working on this
Yep.
project.
Hmm.
You feel so isolated because you have this big dream, everyone's happy for you and excited for you, but yet you're not delivering quite what you promised yet, and
Yeah.
you may have struggles or something that you're stuck on, and it's just a really lonely time. And I was surprised at how lonely I felt some of those late nights when I was just by myself, and I just wanted to be like, wow, does anyone care right now? And I know that doesn't
Yeah.
really fall in line with what like a hobby project should be, but I'm just being completely transparent.
Yeah, but I don't feel like your feelings are. If you go on to Indie Hackers and read the stories of people building things by themselves, that is not an uncommon theme. You see it constantly, and I think persevering through those psychological troughs, the downtimes, the loneliness, is what when people come out on the other end, they may forget that they felt that low, but they got there at some point. And that's why I think having other people, at least on the just a buddy of some kind that you can talk to about these frustrations helps tremendously. Um, and it's something that, again, I do with Don a lot. And I haven't talked to you about stuff I'm building, but I know that I probably will if I start doing another solo project. So going back to our timeline, you did the first 10 days. You, I don't know if you were talking about the next 10, the 20 or the 10 to 20 days segment, but how was that going?
That was one of the hardest parts because here's what happens. I hit that valley that I kind of described that I was afraid of in the
Yeah.
first 10 days. I hit that valley. So for people who are not aware, there's this idea that when you introduce a new technology, at first everyone's really happy. And then as you get
Yeah.
to know it and learn and work with it, your productivity drops really low, and your motivation drops really low, and things seem so hard where you almost want to back out and say it's better to use something else or go a different route. And I
Yeah.
hit that part because here's the problem that I kept running into is there a solution for X, whatever that
Yeah.
thing was? If I wanted to start working on data persistence, is there a plugin for Flutter that does X? Or does
Hmm.
anyone do this? Do I have to write it? What do I need to do? How should I organize my data? Or when I say data, I even mean internal data. Let's just talk about the state of in the application. How do
Yeah.
I manage the state? How do I organize the code so that way it's not spaghetti code at the end of this thing? Right. So a
Hmm.
lot of those things came into play where I got past the quote unquote hello world phase. And I got into
Yep.
like the real deep, like kind of depths of the application design phase where you have to make smart decisions that will hopefully help you and not harm you later.
How did you get out on the other end of that?
with a lot of frustration, to be completely honest. And a lot of that was, for instance, I would use plugins that weren't ready. And that
Mm-hmm.
happened to me quite a few times where I'd use something that wasn't ready or that a breaking change would be introduced within days of me including it in my project. And all the
Yeah.
warnings are there that Flutter's in alpha, that the Firebase plugin is in alpha, that this other plugin is in alpha, right? So the warning signs are there. So I'm not mad at the Google team or Flutter team. It's just
Yeah.
that was the life I kind of chose, and I have to remind myself that like I chose this path intentionally. And
Yes.
sometimes I would ask, like, you know what? If I went back and did React Native right now, yes, I would lose some of the things or goals that I think Flutter offered, but I bet you I could
Mm-hmm.
finish the project much faster.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, there's a reason why I work on Rails so much. It's changing. It's changing a lot, and Don is a part of that. But I totally hear you, because when you are an experienced developer and you know how to get things done, you know how to get them done well. Taking a new technology to do the same things you've done before and hitting those alpha problems or things that you just don't know is frustrating. Like really frustrating. So you got on the other side of it. The last 10 days of the goal, talk about that.
So in the last 10 days, so I get past the basic parts around, let's say, login and data persistence, because that was a lot of the middle time. So I get past that. I get some version of it working. Okay, so I'm moving forward, moving forward, moving forward. We hit the last 10 days. Then I start thinking about what are the minimum features that I need to ship that this thing is usable. I'm cutting out anything that doesn't improve the usability. So anything extra is gone. And I'm
Yeah.
working pretty rapidly, and I'm noticing, here's the problem: as you're rapidly prototyping, you cut so many corners that
Yeah.
you actually forget this form doesn't have user validation. People can just type in whatever whatever they want, right?
Yes.
Or this button, there's no loading animation to let them know that the thing is doing something in the background, that the data is
Yeah.
persisting. And so I'm trying to plug all these holes that I left in this mad dash of this application. And so that's what happens in the last 10 days. So I get through the first five. I'm feeling pretty optimistic. I'm keeping a paper list of all the things that I want to do. Then I realize that list is too hard to read. So I quickly open a Trello board. I list like 40 things on it. I start dragging things to version 2, version 2, version 2. What are just the top 10 things? So I start to work on those things. Then I get toward the last 3 days.
Yeah.
And that's where things just really, you say, the crap hit the fan. And that's why I was coming from like a really high emotional point where I felt like I could see the finish line, and I was actually going to finally prove myself right. I was going to make everybody proud. I was going to be like the success that I knew I could be. And the success really meant just getting the app out off of my phone, off of my laptop.
Yeah.
Someone else can do it without me saying, let me plug in your phone, right? So I was so close to that success, and I could see it. And then that's when I run into all the problems around doing the build and export, where you can actually build this thing and you can export it. And then
Mm-hmm.
I got a plugin conflict where I was working with Firebase and the Firebase login, and I had to upgrade Gradle, but I had never really used Gradle in configuration. And so then
Mm-hmm.
I'm really stuck because I can't solve it on my own within 3 days because I don't know where to start with the problem with Gradle. And so,
Okay.
of course, given enough time, I could solve any problem as a senior experienced engineer. With enough time, you can learn it, start to dissect it. At this point, I don't have the skill set to really work with Gradle. And so then I get stuck there. Okay, I finally get over that hump. We're into like the last 36 hours before I'm supposed to submit to the iPhone store and then the
Yeah.
Apple store. I get, 36 hours turns 24 hours away. I realize that there's no way I'm going to be able to get the iOS thing working because this whole time I had been developing on PC and Android.
Mm-hmm.
Even though this thing is cross-platform, I had never configured the iOS version. So I say, okay, that's not a big deal. A ship is a ship, right? So if I ship it to
Yeah.
Android, that still counts.
Yep.
And so we get into like the last 12 hours. It's like New Year's Eve. I'm out on the trip with my family. And so I knew that we had planned to go away for the weekend. And so what ends up happening is my 31 days or 30 days becomes like 29 and a half.
Okay.
because I told my wife that I would be focused on family time because I had been working from the hours of 9 to 1 a.m. the entire time at over the 30 days.
Yeah.
And as I'm going up against the the final build, and this is when we talked and you DM me, I was near tears. It was 1 a.m. the night before our trip. I'm up
Yep.
1 a.m. and I'm working on this thing and I'm typing away. Okay, can't find the the signing key that you need to sign your package. Okay, so I go on Google all night. I'm doing all this stuff, and so I'm doing all of this work. All right. And I
Yeah.
still remember this moment, like I'm getting like a little like, worked up here because I remember the feeling of failing because it was 1:45. The build wasn't working. I couldn't figure out the build problem and I couldn't get it to build and deploy. I couldn't figure out how to do the automatic signing that the Google Play Store needed. And I was out of gas. I was
Yep.
just tired. I had no more energy. I told my wife, I've given her my word that I was going to not have my laptop on our family trip for New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And so
Hmm.
if I didn't release by that 1:45 a.m., I felt like everything was over. And that for me was like it was devastating. I felt defeated at that point. I really felt like I failed everything.
But you didn't.
Right.
You did. I mean,
I didn't.
but so, and I remember the tweets. I remember seeing it from the outside, and you had mentioned earlier the psychology of a developer can be what does anyone else care? Does anyone care? And the truth is that someone does care, and that person is you, and that's what matters a lot. But you
Hmm.
kept but you didn't take the computer with you on the holiday, correct?
Correct.
And when did you launch?
I think I launched maybe mid-January, something
Okay.
like that. So a couple of weeks after, because then I figured out what the plugin problems were. There were some changes. I remember submitting some questions online to the Gitter community, and I remember someone came back and answered my question randomly while we were on
Hmm.
vacation. And I remember saying, "Okay, I'm not going to work on this thing. I'm not going to do anything. I can't do anything, right? Because I gave my word." So I'm like, "Nope, not going to look at it." But I remember getting the emails. And so I started working from there. So I think maybe first or second week of January I ended up launching, and that was stupendous. I can't even lie to you. That was like one of the best feelings I'd had in such a long time.
I just want to go back to you went to sleep um, on the night that you did not ship based on the standards that you set. Um, and so, tell me about how you felt between that time going on the holiday break that you promised. You kept that promise, so you did accomplish
Yeah.
something. And then you had about 2 weeks in between. Talk about how you felt over that time. Like, talk about the next day you woke up, and then the 2 weeks after that.
Yeah. So the next day I woke up, I remember this really intense feeling of like failure.
Hmm.
And even though, we had talked and you're like, you didn't fail. And I'm like, I know, but I gave my word that I could do this, like I set this expectation to the world. And so I just, I felt really down when I woke up and I was like, and more than that, I felt like this, here you go, repeating the cycle of not delivering on your
Hmm.
ideas. That was the biggest thing that I like. So like we've been talking about psychology and like how it plays on you as a developer, especially
Yeah.
as a founder of anything. That voice in my head kept echoing that you're repeating the same cycle of non-completion.
Hmm.
And like that was really weighing on me. And literally everyone I talked to who had been following, who were not on Twitter, my friends and family, who been like, "What are you working on? Why are you always up so late?" You know, and, they all wanted to
Yeah.
know. And they had all said the same thing that you said, Mark, you didn't fail. It's out of your control that this technology didn't work, but you're going to get it. I heard that like 80 times, right? You're going to get it. It's going to work.
Yeah.
And I get so frustrated with that because I'm like, I knew I'm going to get it, but I didn't get it when I wanted to, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
like that was the frustration. And so but then I told myself something else, that life is so much more meaningful. And this is a little bit non-technical, right? But it's like, you know what, Mark, if you go into this holiday with your family And because we rented a house in Galena, and we were just like, you know what, we're gonna do the New Year's Eve with our friends, and we're like, we rented this house, and I'm like, if you go over there moping, you're gonna ruin it for everybody.
Yep.
And I just refused to do that. So I just said to myself, okay, it did not work. You did not meet this particular version of the goal, but this, and you told me this. You actually said this to me, and that actually is what calmed me down. You told me that it wouldn't be interesting if you did meet it. Right? Like this is an interesting story. So if I go and talk about this experience like on the podcast or go give a meetup talk, this will be more interesting to people, that they see that it is not like all like perfect and that you struggled and that they're not alone like that. I was like, you know what? I can turn this around and to make it a really engaging story. So that actually helped me kind of come out of that funk that I was in. But I'm not going to pretend like that was immediate. It took me like 8 to 12 hours of like stewing in my own like brattiness to like come out of it.
Well, the 80 people you talked to were telling you the right thing, but everyone knows when you have set in your mind defeat, you don't want to hear it from anyone. You prefer people not even talk to you about it, and it's
right.
But you want the support. You want that network, the community, to be like giving you the support you need, the well wishes, whatever. But you also, at that point, you're just like, I'd prefer not to talk about this. let me stew and moan in peace. But the truth is, you need to embrace the support of your community because they're going to help you get back up.
100%.
I mean, I've been there before. This is a project years ago that I did, and I failed to meet a deadline on features I promised some people paying me for things. And I had to go through that, and it was rough. I remember it. But I also remember I got the project to a point where everyone was like, oh, no, that's good enough. We knew what you were doing. And I was like, oh, really? Like, you weren't expecting perfection? And they're like, no, you're not charging that much. So I'm like, oh. So you have to set expectations for yourself as well. And yeah, I saw you going through that, and I was like, oh, I've been there. I remember so vividly the feelings I had. So you launched. You got through the feeling of failure. You did go on your vacation. You got back. You worked through the bugs. Talk about launch day.
Oh, launch day I remember still to this moment. I was in the home office because I was off that day. And I remember just saying, okay, Mark, just stay calm. What would you tell your students to do? And I literally remind myself, like, hey, if your students get really worked up that they didn't turn in a homework assignment on time, you, from the bird's eye view, the outsider looking in, you can objectively tell them, take a break. You can work through this. You will solve the problem. Just give yourself time. And so that's the process between the quote unquote failure to launch day. So as I'm working on the launch, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Oh, Google wants me to create an account on this part of the app. I'll create an account here. Oh, Google wants me to sign this thing. I'll sign it. And even though it was frustrating, I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to sign. I'm just going to keep going, Mark, just one step at a time. And so as I get to launch day, and I remember sitting here and I uninstalled the demo version from my phone. And I remember hitting publish, and I kept hitting refresh on the screen. And I'm hitting refresh over and over again because I'm waiting for it to show up in the App Store. And then I'm like, what's wrong with this thing? Why is it not showing up? It says it's approved. And then I remember that I had to like click one more button to say it's available for like use. It's like, oh, okay, you're right. And then I remember clicking on it, and then I went on my phone, and I got my phone, and I remember like going to the App Store, and I hovered. So like I typed in the app name, and I selected it, and I walked into the living room. My wife was nursing our son, and I handed her my phone, and like I get a little emotional because I was so proud of myself. But I handed her my phone and said, "Look, And she's like, wow. And I'm like, I did it. I actually like shipped all the way through. I actually followed through, Rachel. And she was like, I'm so proud of you. And I'm like, I'm so proud of myself. You know what I mean? Like it's someone else can like look on, well, no one else because it was a private alpha, but theoretically someone else could search totally strong on the phone and it would show up. And I was just like, I can't believe that I did this. Like, and it was just so triumphant. And all of that time before felt like, it felt like nothing, like the moments, of failure, it didn't matter anymore. Because then I could look at the long game and I was like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter because I still did it. And so, yeah, that was amazing. That was an amazing day.
Awesome. Well, that is a full story that I feel like many people, many developers, whether they're going through our classes as boot campers or trying to build something or they want to eventually build something, this story happens all the time. But it's so good to hear from someone that did it recently, that has experience. Like, this isn't something that, these feelings are not something that happens to just beginners. These are things that people go through when they have been doing development for a while. And thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. And I want to bring you on in the future as you learn more about the Flutter framework and you develop this app for your user base. Like, this is just a really good lesson for folks to know and to hear and maybe listen again if they hit these low points. So again, thank you for coming on and talking about this.
Oh, this was a blast. I really, really enjoyed it. And I would love to come on and support, because one of the things that I think helps is just knowing that you aren't the only one. That just helps so much. So thank you so much for having me.
So you do have another goal, if I remember on Twitter, is you're going to go see a movie, which is an amazing goal in itself in your life right now, based on everything else going on. So I'm going to let you go so you can hit that theater and I guess is A Quiet Place. Is that what you're going to go see?
Yeah, you know what? I was thinking about whether or not I should do it, and I'm going to just go, like, right after this call. I'm going to the theater. I'm going to just go by myself. My wife doesn't like scary movies, so I'm just going to go catch a movie.
All right, man. Well, have a good time, and we will talk in the future.
All right, sounds good. Thanks again. Take care.
Yep, later.
Thanks for listening to This Old App. Show notes and previous episodes can be found on our website at www.thisoldapp.online. Reviews on Apple iTunes are always appreciated and help promote the show. For questions, comments, or things you would like to hear on future shows, please email us at hello@thisoldapp.online. Show music is Guns Blazing by Fab Claxton, licensed by Pond 5. Voiceover work by MeganVoices.com. You'll hear from us soon.